This is Love Notes, daily devotions from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Grace and peace to you. Our text today is Luke, the 23rd chapter, verses 13 through 25. The trial of Jesus continues. Pilate now calls together all of the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, those in power, those who've brought Jesus to him. And he says to them, "You brought me this man as one who was perverting the people." So he listened. "And here I have examined him in your presence, and I have not found this man guilty of any charges against him." He's pronounced innocent twice. Neither has Herod. Herod hasn't found anything wrong with him. He sent him back to us. Indeed, he has done nothing to deserve death. I will therefore have him flogged. Other translations of the Greek word here could be a little less specific, maybe a little more tongue-in-cheek. I will have him educated would be one way of terming it. I will have him disciplined. I will teach him a lesson. But it probably all gets down to the flogging, some kind of torture. And then when he's done with that, after he's been beaten, for no reason at all, I'll release him. That's Pilate's judgment. But then they all shouted out together, "Away with this fellow! We don't want him. Release Barabbas for us." Well, this is interesting. Who's Barabbas? Luke tells us in parentheses, this was a man who had been put in prison for an insurrection that had taken place in the city and for murder. So he has been caught doing the things that Jesus was accused of. Being a threat to the government, being an insurrection, being a threat to the nation. He's been caught and imprisoned for that. On top of that, he's a murderer. And the crowd wants him instead of Jesus. Give us violence and conflict and chaos, they say. Take away the peace and the justice and the mercy. Now we might at first stand kind of agape with our mouths hanging open, thinking, how could they do this? But think about the world that we continue to live in. How those who are caught red-handed, those who are convicted rightly, are let go. Those who have enough money or power or privilege or their friends in right places get to go on making chaos. And the people who stand for the right things, well, they languish. They languish in obscurity at best and in prison at worst. This is the choice that's being made by the world as Jesus comes to his moment. Do you want chaos and death and violence and conflict? Do you want shooting in the streets? Do you want warfare to continue? Or do you want the one who will set you free from all that? And the people in power say, give us the former. Then it says Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again. But they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." A third time he says to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" His innocence is pronounced again. "I have found in him no ground for the sentence of death. I will therefore have him flogged, disciplined, made an example of, and then I will release him." But they kept urgently demanding with loud shouts that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. Right before his eyes, Pilate is seeing that he's got a riot potentially on his hands. He's got something that could get back to Rome and give him a bad report card, because sometimes your superiors don't really want justice. What they want is everything to continue to be smooth, status quo. So after all of the shouting and announcing him innocent 3 times, it says Pilate gave his verdict that their demand should be granted. He caved in. Pilate loses control. You see, he's thought he was in control this whole time. And he may still think he's control, making the final decision. But the path to the cross has been set. Jesus is still the one in control. Jesus predicted that he would be put to death 3 times. Pilate declares him innocent 3 times. And yet it's Jesus whose prophecy is correct. So they released this Barabbas. And I find myself saying, seriously? He released a guy who was a threat to Rome and Jerusalem because the crowd said so? And to reiterate it again, Luke says, the one who had been put in prison and for insurrection and murder, that's the one they let go. And Jesus, they handed over to be crucified. You see how warped that is? But the reversal is taking place. The evil powers are being unmasked. How do you keep Pilate in any semblance of honor and dignity, knowing that this is how he acts? How do we look at the political powers of this world, the people who make the decisions, when they make decisions to trample upon the innocent and not see them for who they really are? That's what Jesus is doing here. He's unmasking Herod and Pilate, the religious officials, and everyone who stands against God for being what they are, against God. You see, they have to be judged first, and that is what is taking place. Pilate's been judged. Herod's been judged. The people have been judged. And the way they've been found is guilty of rejecting God. We should think about that in the world that we live in. What values do we hold to? What leaders do we support? What are the things that we do when the innocent are accused? Do we like things just to be the same? Or do we long for something new? Amen.